Beck, George, how are you?
Good. How are
Hey,
you?
Jason. Good.
Great to have you guys on. Excited to dive into this one. So we'll be talking through how do you actually operationalize and execute on this whole ABM thing, which I have to say, when I was asked to fill in and host this and looked at what the topic was, I got a little bit excited because this is in my wheelhouse and what I've done for the bulk of my career. So I know there's a lot to talk through here. That'll actually lead me to my first question for you guys. But before we do that, you want to do a quick introduction on your guys' side so everybody knows who you are?
Sure, I can go first. So I'm Beck Henrich. I'm the VP of Marketing for Traction Complete. We are a revenue operations provider of apps on the Salesforce App Exchange. So we help with lead management, lead routing, matching, all those kind of fun things, as well as account hierarchies. About myself, I have about 15 years in marketing. Predominantly in like demand gen and marketing tech. So I'd say like MOPS before it was MOPS. And now a little bit more on the strategy side as well with my team. And yeah, worked across a couple of different industries and now in a couple of different countries because I'm now based in Lisbon and been here for about a month. So George and I were talking shop about coffee. I know. I think I'm a little bit sunburnt, so I have a bit of a glow here from. It's been like 29 degrees yesterday for all of those in North America where it's raining and cold. Sorry, guys. But yeah, George, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm actually based out of just in the Toronto area, so just east of Toronto. I've been in the space now for a little over 9 years, kind of working with Oracle on the Eloqua platform, and then going from vendor to client side where I've been ever since. I'm currently at a company called Coveo. I've been here for just over 3 years. I'm currently the director of marketing operations, and I lead a team of marketing operations experts supporting the organization on the data side, on the architecture side, on the campaign operations side. I joined the company at an interesting time, 2 weeks into the pandemic. It was not wasn't coordinated or on purpose. It was a bit of an interesting time, but really interesting to join at a company at a time when things were really kind of transitioning. Like marketing literally kind of had to adjust almost overnight. So yeah.
Great. Well, it's awesome to have you guys on. And like you were alluding to there, George, it's been an interesting several years. So between the pandemic and then everything that started happening, a little, yearish ago with, the economy slowing down and, all the cuts, especially in the tech space. And then, a lot of that, that's coincided with it, some of it just, sort of by coincidence, some of it driving it. But, what I've seen kind of across the board right now is the old go-to-market strategies, the playbooks, the easy buttons that everybody was using for so long and dominated, especially here in the tech industry, those all sort of stopped working about the same time that the economy started slowing down and money started to tighten up from the investor side of things. And so you're hearing pretty universally like, hey, I got to do something different. And for a lot of people, it's, I don't really know what to go do differently. So as part of that, ABM starts coming up more and more and more. It was already sort of a hot topic even before all of that. But ABM as a solution or potential solution to this keeps coming up increasingly, which begs the question. Everybody I talk to has a different definition or idea of what ABM is. And I've heard all kinds of crazy stuff relative to it. So I would love to begin with your guys' take on what exactly this ABM thing is.
I think that's such a great topic because we're talking about ABM, but in reality, and I do really I think I saw demand-based shift their messaging recently to be more about like go-to-market because the M, I think, is a little bit of a misnomer because it's not just marketing. In order for your account-based strategy to be actionable and effective, it actually needs to go across multiple departments. So it needs to be, your frontline, website window to, from the marketing perspective, to your BDRs and your sales team, to your CS team. I think it's limiting to say it's just a marketing activity, and it's also less effective if it's just a marketing activity.
Absolutely.
So I think calling it ABM is probably also a little bit inaccurate from what we're saying, but at the same time, it is the ability to really hyper target the accounts that matter and then run plays against them. That's my thoughts. What about you, George?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo everything you said, and add on to it. I've heard a lot of companies now shift from saying ABM to ABX, which is the account-based experience. I know Six Sense, who were Coveo were customers of. It's something a term they like to use, but I agree with you. It's not just isolated or siloed into marketing. It's very much broader and larger than that. So we definitely have a lot of teams involved. I'd say for us, the big part of account-based marketing for for what it is for us is making sure we're aligned with sales on the marketing strategy and making sure we're in like constant lockstep with each other. It's less of that like traditional silo of like, hey, here are leads from marketing. Once they are marketing qualified, we hand them off to sales and good luck. We want to make sure that we're kind of in lockstep, getting that feedback loop, not every end of quarter, but like in real time, on a daily or at least at the very least a weekly basis. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I've managed BDR teams for most of my career, even though I was in marketing and demand gen. And frankly, it's been, I don't know, 3-ish years since I've seen BDRs as like their own little siloed group, going after accounts that have been effective. And, I mean, that's, even hiring with experienced managers and, great intent signaling and stuff like that, unless they were working in a ABX strategy. And so and you've seen that with a lot of layoffs and stuff like that. The roles and departments that have been eviscerated most over anything are those sort of outbound BDR type teams. And so I think all of this is super, super timely and topical relative to what we're seeing out there. So relative to that, what are, in your experience, what are the biggest challenges with executing or operationalizing ABM strategies or ABM plans?
I think from like looking at from what I've seen more recently, and it kind of goes back to what I just said about aligning your go-to-market and maybe it not just being ABM, it's everyone. It's just getting everyone on the same page. Making sure that you've got alignments between all your team and it's more than just maybe lip service. There's actually actions in there. And, I think that's really where ops comes in for that accountability and measuring and making sure that people are kind of accountable to what they're doing. I think the other thing is really understanding who makes the decisions in those accounts. So not single threading your deals, but looking at how do you actually, through maybe your account-based marketing, target multiple personas within there, and what personas actually matter when it comes to selling your product, whether it be software or not. Does the CFO play a role? Does the CIO? Where does all of those people kind of play a role in your deals? Because from an ABM strategy, if you only get one person in that organization, you're not necessarily going to close that deal. It's all about that unit within that business. So that's kind of one thing that kind of worries me about ABM and the things that I think you really need to get some alignment on.
What about you, George?
Yeah, I'll add on that. So everything Beck said, I wholeheartedly agree. I would say a lot of organizations in my experience will like, hey, exactly what Beck said, kind of pay it lip service. Like, yeah, we do account-based marketing. We're reporting on these accounts. We kind of like quasi-target them. Organizations are a little more down the rabbit hole with account-based marketing, or really like, they kind of leverage the tools. They've identified the accounts. They have dedicated people who focus on these accounts. I think the really important challenge to address is really scaling efforts. Today, I mean, I'll be transparent. We always have the challenges of making sure that we don't have the team operating in silos. We have our standard like go-to-market strategies, but we want to make sure that our account-based strategy is not siloed off from the rest of it, and they're kind of in unison, working in tandem, albeit a little more targeted, a little more personalized on the account-based approach, a little more surgical, we'll say. For us, a big thing too is data alignment. I would say is super important. How we're going to measure the success of account-based marketing. It is a new term. Like, ABM wasn't a thing when I got into the industry in early 2014. So it was in its infancy at the time, and we didn't have the tools or tracking methodologies we have today. So it's really kind of getting that buy-in and alignment ahead of time. The last thing you want to do is start identifying new data points or new KPIs when the plane's already in flight. So really aligning on that, and then working with strategies with go-to-marketers to like operationalize that piece. I know it's kind of our theme of the webinar, but really kind of just understanding like, how do we do ABM? What does this mean from like when we have to put our hands to the keyboard and really kind of come up with some tactical plans? How does it really work, and kind of getting away from that more theoretical discussion of what ABM or ABX is. So,
yep. So, as we've alluded to here a little bit, ABM can be quite complex, which is the reason why a lot of companies don't bother with it, or when they do, they're doing something that sort of minimally might be considered ABM, or on sort of the good side of the equation, or maybe even going completely off the rails, if they're not executing well on it. So a lot of this boils down to data and systems whenever you're doing that. So there's, of course, the soft skill side of it, making sure everybody's on the same page, and we should go execute against this strategy and stuff like that. But you need that buy-in, but that buy-in is not going to actually allow you to effectively manage all of this complexity. So let's start on the tooling side of it. What are the things or the pieces of it that you think are really essential to being able to coordinate? Because we're talking about coordination not just across team members, but departments, roles, functions. A lot of times that also includes like siloed data or tech that's isolated to sort of one department or one role. But now you've got to try and manage what's going on across multiple different roles and functions. Who'd like to go first?
I'm happy to take this one, unless Beck, unless you want to go first. But I'm happy to take this one. So great question. So I would say it's definitely a combination of things. Obviously, your systems need to be in line. I'm going to speak from my own experience here. Like, obviously, you have a marketing automation platform and a CRM. They need to be fully synced. A big thing I would say that needs to kind of tie the data together, which helps us at least, is having an actual ABM platform. So as I mentioned earlier, we're 6 Sense customers. So one thing that we really wanted to do when we're implementing ABM is, we know ABM is going to touch each of the internal shared services. We have like marketing operations, which is the ones kind of building up the landing pages and the emails, and kind of getting the digital component of the campaigns up and running. We have a paid media team where we're running ads on Google and LinkedIn, and we want to make sure that when they get their ABM list, they're not disconnected from, say, our ABM list. So a big thing is centralizing the data and then scaling it for any changes. Being in MOPS, anyone who's in MOPS, there's always, nothing's really final until it's up in the air, but like there's always a lot of last minute changes. So for us, it was really much getting our identified accounts, having them tagged in the CRM, and then if we have to make tweaks, being able to adjust them in real time and be able to proliferate that cross-function across all the different technology stacks, whether it be Marketo for us using our marketing automation platform, and the CRM and Salesforce if we're using our LinkedIn or Google Ads, and things like that. So really very much comes from making sure that the data is not siloed, making sure there's a cohesive collaboration platform, like a project management platform. You very much want to stay away from using email and Slack. Really, you kind of need that centralization to make sure everyone is roped in. So I would say that's kind of like some of the big things to make it go cross-functional. A lot of ABM, I'll say this too, like ABM, you don't need a shiny tool to start ABM. Like, it's one of those things where like once you have a strategy or plan, then you should like start on with the tool. But the big thing is alignment with the marketing and sales orgs, and making sure that alignment is in the data in the CRM, and you have a single source of truth for that. And then once you're kind of building out more stuff, you can use an ABM platform to really kind of get larger intent signals from outside your tracked ecosystem, and then tie that data together across your broader MarTech system.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. Like, George, I think having a platform that can kind of centralize everything will help get that all your teams aligned. I think the one thing, unfortunately, for a number of organizations, maybe they don't have the budget for some of the bigger platforms. I think it's understanding in that case, like, what are the things that you're doing and what do you need to, maybe it's website identification. So you could start small with something like a lead feeder, or maybe just using Bombora or something like that, to understand, okay, I want to target one area, use tools that kind of help you there. Or, maybe it's your matching that you've got a challenge with. It's like making sure that the accounts that you've identified go to the right people. So obviously you can use something like Traction Complete for ours, but there's a lot of other routing tools as well, if you wanted to look at others. I think it's understanding the first point where you are looking to tackle your ABM, making sure that you have the tools that support that in the event that you can't purchase like the beautiful 6 Sense demand base and terminuses of the world, which kind of help you empower everything. But yeah, I think there's ways to kind of hack it if you can't afford everything. There's also ways to kind of get a bit of ABM in different tools, like kind of qualified within their web chat. You can kind of plug in some ABM stuff from other areas. So I think it's trying to find the best fit for your organization once you kind of understand your budget and your strategy.
Yeah, because it's obviously a lot more complex and involved than just keeping everybody pointed at the same accounts. Because you need to know what motions are being done relative to what accounts, what signals you're getting back. Especially if you add in, outbound from a BDR type role, or or even you've got inbound reps replying to people that fill out forms. That you don't want to get wires crossed. You don't want to be doing something on the automation side when somebody's having an actual conversation, or if you've got two different people having different conversations, with the same person, or even more common and, adding more complexity to it, is when multiple people are having different conversations with different people at the same account, which can get all kinds of wonky whenever you do that. And so lots and lots of data and tech stack that you've got to try and sort out in doing this. But it begs the question: what channels, what types of motions do you guys typically leverage in a ABX type strategy? So you touched on ads, you touched on content, email, inbound, but what are you typically trying to coordinate across when you run these?
Do you want to take that one, George?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. And I'll tie it into kind of like the current economy and how things are today. I think every marketer here is kind of, we face some challenges. Obviously, we've all being directed to do more with less. But the other thing too is that a lot of our strategies, which worked a couple of years ago at the height of the pandemic, for example, virtual events were the thing in 2020. Those are saturated today, so it's a lot more challenging, to get people to sit for a full day in a virtual event versus like a webinar like this, which is a little more easier on people's times. But we remember when 2020, I think it was like fall 2020 when we launched our first virtual event, we had people for multiple days coming into sessions for the whole day, kind of blocking off the calendars. I feel like today that just would not happen, not as effectively as it did a couple of years ago when we were stuck at home. So realistically, the strategies have changed. We've adopted a couple of different strategies we're using. So we've kind of gotten more focused. So we still do virtual events, but we're a lot more surgical, a lot more intimate in the events. So like smaller group of people, people similar levels, similar industries. So it's more of like a thought leadership type of virtual event, whether it be like a wine tasting or a whiskey tasting, or even just like a food night, like a taco night where you can make tacos and you have a host and discuss some of things. We've also used gifting, and I did see someone in the chat mentioned asking about where gifting ties into ABM, and we do use gifting pretty extensively as well. Not so much to get a meeting booked, but really to get us accelerating the pipeline and really kind of identifying our accounts, finding some of our people were maybe having challenges at moving along. and really kind of targeting them with either these virtual events or these gifts as well. We've also been toying now a little bit with physical events now that they're kind of coming back, but a little more like focused. So not like renting out a whole space for an entire day and having thousands of attendees, but having something smaller, more of like a cocktail hour or like a dinner, and really kind of just being hyper targeted in our accounts and the personas we get, and make sure we want to also mix them with our customers as well. We find our customers are our biggest advocates. When we, especially in, I'll say it's more on Coveo side, having a product where like a lot of our customers become evangelists and want to bring it from company to company. It's super important to have those people meet some of the target accounts we're going into to kind of really help them demonstrate as a customer the value of our product. So.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, nothing's going to be received better than your customer talking about what you're doing instead of you sitting there talking about it.
I think that's definitely like where like gifting can play a better role. Like I think from my point of view, putting gifting in at the start of your prospecting in ABM, you can waste a lot of money really quickly. Where I think from if you're either accelerating deals or maybe one of the things that I really loved, there's a person who I follow, her name is Karina Owens. She's the senior ABM manager at Gong. And she recently talked about like rewarding your advocates as they move from company to company, just like you said, George.
Oh my God, that's such a great strategy.
And that's where you can gift without full expectation, but at the same time, you're gifting someone who you kind of know will likely take you with them to the next company. You want to have that person who buys, at the first company, and then as they move, as people do right now, take you to the next one and next one. And I think that's where like gifting can play a really strong role within ABM. Is like getting the accounts from your advocates, not necessarily from an industry or a different type of geographic targeting.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I'm like you. I'm typically very careful with when I roll out something like gifting that carries a significant price tag with it. Although I'll have to say, I had a guest on Outbound 2.0 a few weeks ago who was background was in growth, and he's got one of many things that he's working on. He's got a agency that does meeting, demo booking, whatever for different clients. And he had a really interesting approach to it, which was go out with a very significant offer on the monetary or gifting side of things in exchange for somebody to sign up for and attend a product demo, but then add a whole bunch of intentional friction and qualification between that point and the actual meeting, so that you can make sure that one, with that additional friction, that they're actually really interested in it, and two, that they're highly qualified. And the way that he got to that number for like what makes sense from a significant value add or monetary incentive was looking at the true cost of acquisition with these, incorporating in what the cost of reps time it is to reach out and get these meetings booked. And I was sitting there, I was like, you are really truly a growth person, because you took all of this holistically and put it together and was like, okay, how does this actually make sense from a go-to-market and monetary standpoint? But really interesting hearing that strategy and that side of things. So we've got a few questions in here, and it corresponds with the mention of the growth piece. But questions like, how do you create the best messaging that works, especially when you're having to do it across different departments, channels, roles, stuff like that. Of which I would say that growth mentality is the key to executing against most all of this, which is for those not familiar, based on tracking, making sure you've got data on, running, rapid iteration testing, getting MVPs out, stuff like that. So that, the answer to questions like that become, let's test it. And so, and then the more effectively you do that, you're doing that cross-functionally across all that's going on. Because of course, all these things are running simultaneously and they all have an impact on each other. What have you guys seen work, and what are some of the pitfalls you've seen people fall into relative to that?
I think I'll add something, and then George, you you dive in as well. I think one of the things when it comes to messaging in particular is like thinking what will resonate without actually doing research or testing it, as you said. I think one of the things that I really love, and I'm going to say gong again, is that you can actually now listen to what people are saying in prospects calls, to customer calls, and then you can end up using the words that they use. So I might call, what we do, account hierarchies as a product, but other people talk about connecting parent-child accounts. So it's like understanding the words that the people that are buying use, not the words that you necessarily use, and using those, and then maybe even testing them further. I think we're going to look at using a product called Winter at some point that has people in their community to review things of your prospective buyers if you can't get that voice from your customers or from your prospects, which I think is kind of interesting. What about you, George? What do you think?
Yeah. So go ahead, Jason.
Sorry, I was just going to add one thing in there. So relative to what you were saying back, I say frequently, if you show me a go-to-market person, demand gen, marketer, whatever, that's highly confident in their gut or their opinion, I'll show you one that has not done enough testing. I am ceaselessly amazed at the number of times I'm like, that absolutely is going to work. There's no reason to test it, whatever. And then I put it out there and I'm like, well, I'll be damned.
I think there is some stat that says like 60% of your tests that you think are going to win don't actually, like, they come to a null result or something. Yeah, there's no sizable difference.
I got humbled on that very early in my career.
That's actually a great segue, because we at Coveo, we've adopted beginning at the beginning of this year, we adopted a mantra of 1,000 tests we want to run this year in marketing, or we'll say sales and marketing. So one thing we've really been doing, we've been testing a lot of our content, A/B testing our emails. One big thing I've done, and I think the other shared service teams have done this as well now, but all our tests, we track it in a Google Sheet. And the big thing that we do is we derive statistical significance. For any of my MOPS people tuning in, they'll understand that a lot of tests sometimes, and we'll be transparent, a lot of times just checking a box. We do a subject line test, we kind of get a little creative. There's no statistical significance a lot of the time, or if we do, sometimes it's accidental, or sometimes we do something a little controversial that does give it statistical significance. So what we really did was we looked at different ways we can test, for example, emails. So we looked at, like open rate, click-through rate, click-to-open rate, looking at different times, different layouts, different content, different subject lines, anything you can think of under the sun. And what we looked at was to make sure we were getting statistical significance. Did we see at least a 50% plus increase of the higher response? And if we didn't, should we continue these types of tests? And it kind of confirmed a few things that our guts were saying, which was like our subject line testing can be a little bit more creative. Our from address testing is not really yielding the results we expected. But then we had things like content, like whether it be content placement, plain text versus an HTML email, things like that. And really just content, like, do we want to layer on the content, go heavy, or like, split it up with our ABM accounts? So we could say like plain text to our ABM accounts, a little more like HTML for our non-ABM accounts, and see how that yields results. So we're always kind of testing different things. But going back to that, in terms of like, I guess like, kind of making sure that, things are aligned. Like one thing we've really done that's really helped us with like our messaging, I would say, and making sure that like our marketing and sales messaging is aligned, is we've split up our business development team. We started off by splitting into pods by our lines of business. So we have, Coveo, we sell solutions for commerce, for service and support, as well as for workplace and website. And so we split our BDs into those pods. And then from there, we did an SDR and BDE split. So on the ABM side, we have our SDRs who are more focused on outbounding, but are more strategic in how they look at the account. They're not just getting in all the inbound MQLs that come in, or the contact requests, or the demos at booths at events, things like that. They're more focused on outbounding to their targeted accounts, which are oftentimes our ABM accounts. So they have the right messaging. Like they're masters in their domain of what product they're selling. But then on top of that, they only have a patch of accounts to work. So they're finding the entire buying group using tools like Zoom Info. When people come in inbound, we have Traction Complete automatically, linking our leads to the account so they see that view in real time. If there's an opportunity open, we've actually even automated now adding contact rules to opportunities if the use case matches. If there's an open opportunity right now, the use case matches, Traction Complete matches the lead to the account, and then from there we have Salesforce automation that converts them to a contact, adds them to the opportunity. But we want to make sure obviously the account matches and the use case matches. So they've been consuming content or engaging with content relevant to the product we're selling. And so we've done that. Like I said, without some of our tools we have, obviously without Traction Complete, without a powerful CRM, and without trained SDRs, we wouldn't be able to do this. But it really kind of gives us that holistic view. And then on the marketing side, selfishly, we're always looking at how many touch points are influencing the opportunities. And now I'm confident that I have a holistic bird's eye view of that. Like I can say, hey, for give an example, NRF we attended, at the beginning of the year for, this commerce opportunity. We had 4 people that came by our booth. We had 2 people that joined us for our offsite cocktail party. And, ultimately we see that, for the dollars we invested to attend NRF and bring our team out there, it yielded this many opportunities that eventually became closed won. So we have that good view. And then from there, we can really kind of drive our decision making. So I went a bit on a tangent there, but it kind of how it ties into the whole picture there. So I wanted to kind of, show how we align with sales, and then how sales and marketing both take that data to make sure they're aligned in their messaging and their planning and things like that.
Oh, that's great. Before we go to my next question, so Nico had said something about how important is deduplication and standardization of the data and stuff like that. I'll go ahead and answer that one. It's absolutely critical. It's also, for anybody in rev, marketing, data ops roles, the bane of our existence. Because it doesn't matter how much work you do, how much tech, whatever you put in there, you will never resolve the problem. You're doing the best you can to manage it, but it will always exist. And the implications for that are relatively obvious. If you got multiple versions of the same record, then it's virtually impossible to make sure the same people or the same person's working all of the contacts relative to that account, or if something inbounds that it's routed to the right person, or if you're trying to do data and experimentation. I mean, like, you name it. If you've got multiple flavors of records and people companies in there, then it's a nightmare. So yeah, it's absolutely essential, and it ain't going away, and there's no silver bullet to it, unfortunately. Anything from either of you to add on that front?
I think we both agree that a good data is the foundation of all your operations as well as your reporting, because the junk that you put in is what the junk that you get out. How do you report on something without actually, all of your pipeline will be skewed, all those kind of things. So it's like, I think knowing as you're creating your systems to have like proactive deduplication. So understanding how you're matching. And George, I think you're probably about to go into that.
I am. I'm very passionate about this topic. So.
Oh, you take it then. You take it.
Yeah, no, you both said it exactly. Kind of took the words out of my mouth, and I'll not to shamelessly plug Traction again, but like a big thing that we've done with Traction was our lead to lead deduplication. We initially purchased the tool for lead to account matching, and our CSM, we were just chatting about some problems we had in our CSM over at Traction, kind of gave us, a few ideas of how we can optimize. I'm like, hey, I'm always getting these duplicate leads coming in. Like sometimes it's like a timing issue or race condition with Marketo syncing to Salesforce. Other times sales are coming in at the same time marketing is. And he's like, oh, I got a little solution for you that I can help you with, that'll help you with deduplication. Literally, it solved our entire lead deduplication. Obviously, we still have like cross-object lead to contact, which we, periodically go through and dedupe. But I mean, going back to the question that Nico posted in the chat, it's super important to make sure it's standardized as well, and you have a solid taxonomy along with deduplicated data. Last thing you want to do is start inflating your numbers. And start seeing multiple touch points that aren't really multiple or anything like that. So, so that's realistically how we really do it, is just kind of keep our data clean with Traction Complete, which helps us, not only get it to the right the right account, the right rep, but we're also making sure that we're only sending one record and not a couple that are the same person. So.
This one's going to get a little bit in the technical weeds, but I have to ask it just for my own curiosity. George, it sounds like you guys use leads, contacts, and accounts as objects. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yeah.
Got it. So, for me personally, I basically did away with leads as an object for most companies and go-to-market motions that I've run for quite a few years now, just because leads, at least in the Salesforce, way that they do it, it's not impossible, but it's difficult to bucket those under an account. And so, if you're trying to coordinate everything that's going on relative to anybody at that company, leads have posed a problem for me as a object in the way that they're structured in the past. So how are you guys tackling that?
It's a great question. And I'll echo too. I've heard a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of companies kind of move to more of a single person record approach. I know other CRMs, that's typically how they operate. There's no, distinguishing between leads and contacts. For us, we use obviously lead to account matching through Traction. So we have that full linkage to the account. We've set rules and an order of operations to make sure that, the routing is, or the matching is correct. And I think we've had we have like a 98% plus hit rate. Usually we have issues if it's personal emails, things like that, the more typical challenging ones, but that's more what you mitigate on the front end by, not allowing people to submit forms with Gmails and things like that. But I would say, so it really kind of depends on the organization and the tools they're using. So like in Marketo, for example, Marketo only creates leads in Salesforce. So if you have a net new lead come in, you'd have to have your sales ops team engineer something that automatically convert them to a contact. And if there's no account, you're in trouble. You
Which,
can end
by
up
the
having
way, is remarkably difficult to engineer. I have never, something that, you would think is so dead simple. All right, lead hits system, convert to contact and account. If there's existing account or contact, merge. You would think that's not that hard. Holy crap, is that never ending troubleshooting? It boggles my mind.
you end up either having to create like a bucket account of like people, the account's too small, you never heard of, or you have like literally one person's full-time job is like bringing in these accounts and as the leads come in, matching them. And depending on the size of your database, like if you have hundreds of thousands of records, it's not a scalable thing. So it is challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know why, like so you definitely want to create that bucket account, because if you don't, in my experience, whatever you've engineered will create a bucket or bucket accounts plural for you. And then it's like, hey, why in the world does ABM have 10,000 people in it? It's like, what in the heck?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. But I've seen, on the flip side, when we've spoken to our Salesforce reps, like they've showed us how they use leads, which is different than how we use it at Coveo. Like at Coveo, we just, when a lead's ready to become a contact from where they are in the funnel, we typically convert them. We have some automation that'll automatically convert them, like that opportunity example I gave. But there's other companies where they will intentionally create duplicates. And I think that's maybe what Nico was referring to in the chat earlier, because I've seen that as well. Like, and this is Salesforce's best practice is you have someone as a contact. If they come in again, they come in as a lead. That signals that sales needs to work them, and they either convert them and merge them into the existing contact, or they put the lead to reject, or they delete them. It really varies. I've seen how different approaches companies have taken, but it's kind of almost like a signaling system that like, hey, these need to be worked, and in order to know that they're worked, they're either rejected or converted or something like that. So that one I don't have too much experience with, and it's a little challenging with deduplicating data, but it's it's definitely a thorn in the side for a lot of us regarding the best approach.
Oh, yep. So we've sort of talked most of this time about the execution. How do you do actually run the campaign, stuff like that? But it begs the question. The centerpiece of any ABX strategy is the accounts that you're focusing on and targeting. How do you effectively pick which of those accounts that you need to be targeting? What are you looking for out of that? Because obviously, it's the garbage in, garbage out. So if you're focusing on a select group of accounts and they're the wrong select accounts, then in a lot of cases, arguably, you could be hampering yourself. versus just like a pure random approach to it. If you're working off the wrong, signaling or wrong, data points, stuff like that, like you could just miss the boat altogether. So this is obviously a critical piece of it. So interested to hear you guys' take on it.
George, do you want to start off and then I can add?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, so what we did initially was we had to define our accounts as part of our like our ABM accounts, and we have them tagged actually at the account object in Salesforce today. So a big thing we use Zoom Info to normalize a lot and enrich a lot of our data. So we have Zoom Info data coming in, giving us our accurate industry information, our accurate revenue information, and from there we pretty much will pull a simple report of just looking at a few different fields, and then pretty much get buy-in from every single, we'll say like a sales VP, or in this case, because we're small enough of an organization, we can get sign off from all the AEs. We say, hey, here's our ABM account. Here are the accounts that were identified in your patch. Does this look good? Anyone you want to take off? Anyone you want to add? So for the most part, we get feedback. But I think the key thing there is and this is going back to the whole alignment piece, but making sure sales is involved. The last thing you want to do is launch this as a marketing only initiative without their blessing, and then you get a bit of that pushback or awkwardness. So for us, that's really how we identify our accounts, and then from there, like because they're tagged, and you can see that they're an ABM account at the campaign member object level, lead, contact, and account at level. You see that field, you know that there's someone who's important. So that's how we've done it.
I think the one thing I would add on here is if you're starting from scratch and you don't really know what your ICP is, or maybe you're a growing organization, I definitely look back at your close won and close lost, and kind of look at the firmographics, the details that are related to those particular organizations, or maybe even it's a specific buyer, and create maybe your audiences based on what you're seeing is working. And so that's if you don't have an ICP fully firm in place, go look at your close lost, close won. I think that's where you can kind of find some nuggets of where to focus and then go from there.
Great. What about on the intent signaling side of things? So whether that's first party intent signals, third party, second party being something I would consider sort of like a going and pulling data out of like a Rev Genius community or something like that. What are you guys seeing on that front?
Beck, you want me to start with this one? All right. So I think for us, so we use we pretty much have a bulletproof tracking for all our first party data. Like anything, as soon as you come to one of our track domains, we're pretty solid in tracking that and bubbling that up to the account and the opportunity if there is one. Really, where I don't want to say we have a challenge. It's like we're kind of in new territories here. Is using kind of that third party data. A bit of I'm going to use Six Senses lingo here. The dark funnel, which is basically their intent. Their intent engine, and they can see a lot of traffic coming in from search engines and able to match it to the account. So it's really interesting to see that intent. What we've done, obviously, because it's a little difficult to operationalize it in Salesforce because we don't know if there's a lead. We don't know the lead or contact. We only see the account. We have trained our SDRs and our BDEs to they receive daily reports of their accounts in their patch with 6 Sense data, and you can see like, hey, for example, ABC company searched these 3 relevant keywords that you've tagged in your intent platform. So it's super important. It's not like a clear like, okay, here I have my direction and I need to go action on this, but it kind of shows what they're interested in. And in 6 Sense, for example, we have like 2 types of keywords. You can have like generic and branded. When you see something on the branded side, which is like something that's very specific to us, like if a branded keyword could be like Coveo for Commerce or something like that. We see someone searching that's pretty big. So at that point, it's something you'd want to take a look at the account object. And once again, you can't really see who did it, obviously, but you can see that maybe an account is searching this, and then from there you can kind of work with your contacts in that account. I'll be transparent. We haven't rolled this out specifically for ABM. We've rolled it out broadly across the organization. So if you're an SDR who's in an AE's pod, you get all the accounts that AE owns. You get all of the alerts. So the AE gets them as well as the SDR. So they're both aligned. But yeah, and then obviously, like, we have our standard MQL tracking and campaign tracking that I think most MOPS people are familiar with. And so we combine the two and kind of set an alert system that's only serves up alerts when they're relevant. We don't want to bombard our sellers. So.
I think one of the things to add to that is Seth, right back at the start, asked about, hey, ABM platforms for non-SaaS organizations. One of the things I do recommend when you are looking at purchasing an ABM platform is get them to run a little bit of a match test, from the IP standpoint with the audience that you're targeting. Sixth Sense is fantastic for like SaaS organizations, and if that's kind of who you're targeting. But that may not be who everyone is. And others, I think, have different benefits in different industries, maybe more than others. So I would recommend, like, when you are looking at the dark funnel and matching IPs and all those kind of things, see if the company will run kind of a match test for you on your audiences to see if they're got the best fit for you or not.
That's great advice. Anytime you're dealing with anything on the data, intent signaling front, whatever, test before you buy. Get them to give you a sample list, get them to look at a coverage report, whatever, because mileage varies radically, not just from vendor to vendor, but based off of what your ICP is, your go-to-market, target personas, all of that stuff. And so definitely go through that process of testing. Both of you mentioned in that, though, the considerations and challenges on the tech front when it comes to juggling and merging multiple different intent signals. And especially over the last couple of years, as more and more data becomes available, but also the importance of intent signaling has climbed relative to sort of the dynamics we're seeing macroeconomically right now and stuff like that. The best intent signals that I've been finding typically are non-traditional. So it's not going out and getting data from Sixth Sense or a Bombora or something like that, or looking at first party data that's right there in your marketing automation platform. But it can be going out and looking at taking an NLP layer, natural language processing layer, to public conversations that are going on, or looking at hiring, firing data, stuff like that. And those or going and scraping different websites, directories, stuff like that. And so, whenever you start doing sort of non-traditional things like that, you've got to have a lot of more flexibility from a tech stack standpoint. The only way I've found to really accomplish that, thus far has been doing a relatively sophisticated motion with a CDP, a customer data platform, where you've got sort of a custom place to be able to go and build all of this out and merge all of that data. What have you guys found for solutions with that? Have you been playing around with CDPs as an additional piece of tech stack? Because that was one in the B2B SaaS space that I never heard of until a few years ago, and then started hearing it more and more, and frankly got spoiled when I was at Astronomer, because we were a data orchestration company. So I was able to eat our own dog food and, orchestrate all this data and push it into a Snowflake instance. And I stole a analyst from DraftKings to go build and, analyze all of this and stuff like that. And so ever since I left there, I've been like, all right, how do I go recreate something like that again?
I guess I'll start with this one. So, I think for us, like, we haven't worked too closely with any CDPs as of yet. Obviously I'm quite aware of them. We've really, a lot of us right now, a lot of our data, like when we have to put in a centralized, kind of try to keep Salesforce as our source of truth. Obviously there's some data you just don't want to put in Salesforce from a marketing best practice. So we do have Snowflake that we, kind of, dump all our data every 24 hours in there, and we're able to query it. But it does require someone who's familiar with Snowflake, comfortable enough to run the SQL queries in there to pull data. We do have it though for some of our essential reporting. So we have like our performance health dashboard, for example. We funnel from Snowflake to Tableau. But dealing with all the different data sources coming in, we've really used Marketo and Salesforce together. I think we're pushing to their limits, to be honest. We definitely will probably be looking at a new solution in the future. But I'll kind of leave it there.
Yeah, I think to add to that, admittedly, I haven't used a CDP either, Jason, but I think one of the things that kind of comes into play when you're bringing in a much heavier piece of technology like a Snowflake is having a person who can use it and run it and knows how to. And selfishly, when it comes to marketing data, I want to be able to play with it. Like, I want to be able to have it in my marketing automation platform or in, my CRM in a way that is usable for me. Which sometimes, if you put it in a tool that you don't have the knowledge, you lose the control and you lose the ability to pivot faster because there's an intermediary. And so whilst it's fantastic and I'm sure it can do a lot of amazing things, that lack of control sometimes when you can't do something at the pace that you need it to be done can be frustrating. So, but I hear you on tracking new channels and kind of understanding how you can actually get that data into a place that you can analyze and understand. And I think the same thing we think about all the Slack communities. There is gold hidden in all of those communities. How can you understand what your buyers are saying in there and see if there's opportunities to sell in a way that is not creepy or stalkerish or like violating any policies?
Yeah, you alluded to some of the stuff I'm building at RevGenius as we speak. So being able to go and see like what is actually being talked about, what are the topics that people would really want to hear something about, being able to pull like hey, we're seeing a lot of noise around needing a solution for XYZ, stuff like that. So not being creepy and selling individual members and stuff like that out, but being able to provide real actual data around what's going on and stuff like that in a non-traditional format or from non-traditional signals. And yeah, to your point back, 100%, like I'm right there with you. Can not stand being slowed down or not having data and stuff in a place that I can't act on it. What we did in that regard was we used the CDP to be able to gather all of the data together, run any of the analytics and stuff like that, and then we would push whatever we needed to back into Salesforce, HubSpot, Marketo, whatever, so that it was there for me to be able to do whatever I needed to with it. But like George was talking about, some data doesn't lend itself to those systems, and you can wind up bending over backwards and pushing it to the limits to try and make something fit with a lot of duct tape and twine and trying to hammer a round peg in a square hole.
I think maybe this is where like things like Chat GPT could play a really interesting role between the two and kind of play that layer that you ask the question to, and then it goes and runs because based on its knowledge that you've been able to teach it, it can run the query for you and spit out the answer on the other side, which I think is like where people are going with a lot of these, AI kind of uses of ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I have on my plate this week, because one of my big projects on the data ops side of things has been getting our data standardized. So like we get asked questions all the time about, how many people in rev ops with the director and above role in North America, at companies over $100 million in revenue, do you have in RevGenius? And it's like, that's kind of hard to get to sometimes because you got umpteen ways to be able to say somebody's title or industry or whatever, and so trying to get all of that in a standardized format has been an ongoing project. But I talked to somebody last week and they're like, so we started playing around with Chat GPT to do that, to try and normalize your data around that. And, they were saying it had some relatively compelling results around it, especially if you go through the process of refining what it's spitting out so that it learns to do it better and better. So that's actually literally one of the things on my plate this week, is to go start, implementing and playing around with that as a potential solution to some of these, data issues that you run into in this.
Jason, let me know how that goes, because that was like the biggest bane of my existence, was doing normalization exercises and
Holy
then
crap.
finding that other bucket and then being like, okay, maybe I could put them into here or something like that. So and especially Marketo, you got to be careful with the order of operations. So
yeah, right behind deduping. That's my second biggest bane.
Yeah, let me know, like, because if ChatGPT can, I've never thought of that as a use case. I'm still finding new things it can help me with, but using that would be quite impressive. And we're talking like exercise that would take like days to do properly could be done in minutes potentially, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And I mean, another one I'm just starting to play with that, because everybody talks about Chat GPT and stuff like that, and it's around the natural language, asking questions, stuff like that. It's actually incredibly powerful from a data standpoint. And so you can feed it data sets and ask it really dumb, stupid questions like, is there anything interesting or outside of normal in that data? And have it spit back out things that you might want to take a look at. And so it's essentially tier one in analyst roles that you can use, AI tools like that for. And it's fascinating playing around with it from that data side of things as opposed to just the natural language pieces of it. Have you guys played around with any of that side of it?
I have not. So I've been looking at, I've seen a few Google Sheets extensions. So I've been looking at seeing if it can derive a little bit more. I like statistical significance against benchmarks for some of our testing. So I've been looking at seeing it with that, but we've been using it more. And I'll maybe, I don't know if we want to make segues, but someone asked this in the chat and it was a very interesting question. I'm like, I want to answer this before the end of the webinar, but someone asked about using Chat GPT for certain things, incorporating AI into workflows, and we were actually experimenting with conversational email, which is going to be interesting. AI powered individual who's able to respond to email. So that's where we've we're incorporating our MarTech stack. We're kind of using it to scale our efforts on the outbound side, but on the data side, like I'm once a week, I'm finding some new use case or some question where I'm like sitting there scratching my head and I'm like, wait a second, maybe ChatGPT knows the answer. So,
yeah. Beck, how about you? You guys playing around with AI and anything?
Oh, I think from a marketing perspective, I think there's really interesting things to help with like simple HTML coding. Like, can ask them to code a certain thing in order to spit out. Maybe it's a new template that you want to do within Pardot. You can ask it to code things, which I think is an interesting use case. Instead of asking it like research questions, but actual practical, I need this, can you give me the code for that? I think can scale maybe the speed to which you could do particular emails or something like that. But outside of that, I ask it all the questions in the world about like, what is this? How do I do this? What's most, like, even for today, I was like researching. I was like, what are the challenges that people are having in B2B with ABM? And it gave me 10 challenges. And I was like, okay, great. I think it's one of those, I've heard people say, is it going to replace like Google search or something like that? And so I've been asking it the dumb questions I probably used to ask Google search.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key to it is, I mean, as people are realizing, it's all about the prompts, but even more than the prompts, I would say, it's taking a collaborative approach to what you're doing with it. Because you're rarely going to ask the right prompt the first time. There may be some training, teaching that you've got to do on your side. It may give you some insights or ideas, but it's not spitting out, AI, at least at this stage, will rarely spit out anything that's absolutely perfect. So you definitely want to do that QA layer with it and all of that before you actually go put it into work. But super, super powerful, the things you can do with it if you know how to go and leverage it as a tool, instead of just like, hey, I'm going to go have it do my work for me. But all right, we're down to just a couple of minutes left. If we didn't get to your question, be sure to follow up with the email whenever we send that out with a recap. So we'll get that out with a recording to it and all of that stuff. Before we wrap, George, Beck, where can everybody find you?
So I can be found on LinkedIn, just my name, George Samaras. You can also find me in the Slack communities. I'm pretty active in the MopsCon. If you ask a question about 6sense, I will try to jump in. I've also set up alerts now for Traction Complete. So when I see a Slack message with those keywords, I always kind of jump in and ask, because they're more niche tools that I have quite a bit of expertise with. You can also find me on the Eloqua Ambassador. I know I talked a lot about Marketo, but I earned my chops on Eloqua. The Eloqua Ambassador for marketingops.com. So I'm also available in that Slack community if you ever want to reach out.
All right.
Awesome. Yeah, LinkedIn as well. I'm also active on the Rev Genies community. So anyone who is in the Slack community there, feel free to DM me. And MoPros, obviously my background is in marketing, so I love to geek out on anything new that people are talking in there. And last but not least, we've recently done like our own video content series, The Revenue Optimists, and every now and again I get the joy of hosting people on there as well, asking questions about revenue operations. And so you get to see me on there every now and again as well. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome, guys. Well, this has been a fantastic chat. I can't thank you enough for coming on. I've really enjoyed myself. So hopefully audience did as well.